The road twisted upward through the forest like a coiled snake, the blacktop barely visible beneath fallen pine needles and last week's dusting of snow. Mara Ellison gripped the steering wheel of her Jeep, knuckles tight and white. The GPS had gone out half an hour ago, and there hadn't been cell service for even longer. Still, she pressed on, her eyes scanning for the wooden sign that marked the entrance to Silver Pines Preserve. When she finally saw it barely legible beneath the moss and rot of years, she exhaled for the first time in miles. She pulled up to a rusted gate. A keypad blinked in green. She typed in the access code the rental agent had emailed her, 2271. And the gate creaked open slowly, groaning like it hadn't been used in weeks. As she drove through, a shiver danced down her spine. Something about the place felt too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that heals you, but the kind that warns you. The cabin itself sat at the far end of the preserve, down a dirt track nearly invisible to the untrained eye. The structure was modest. Pine wood siding, a single porch light flickering. Shutters half-hanging like lazy eyelids. But to Mara, it was paradise. A sanctuary. After the hell of her final weeks at the firm, after the glassy-eyed HR exit interview, after the whispers of burnout and unstable, she needed this. She needed a way. She unloaded her bags and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like old wood, dust, and pine. A fireplace crouched against one wall, cold but inviting. Everything inside was functional, worn but clean except for one thing. A small, white envelope on the kitchen counter, sealed with a wax insignia. Her name was handwritten on the front. Welcome to Silver Pines Preserve. Please note, all residents, even temporary renters, are subject to HOA compliance protocols. Inspections may occur without notice. We are always watching with care. Warmly, SPP Homeowners Board. Mara frowned, rereading the last line. We are always watching. What kind of HOA was this? She laughed nervously, assuming it was just a badly written welcome message, too formal, too ominous. No, still, she crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fireplace. The first few days passed quietly. Mara took long walks in the forest, read paperbacks by the fire, and slowly began to feel herself unwind. For the first time in months, she slept without pills. The pressure in her chest started to ease. But that peace didn't last. On day 4, a man in a khaki windbreaker knocked on her door precisely at 7 a.m. His name was Dean. He introduced himself as a representative of the HOA Compliance Division. His smile never quite reached his eyes. In his hand was a clipboard, and he walked past her without being invited in. We'll need to address some issues, he said, pacing through her living room as if it were his own. Your curtains aren't neutral-toned, which violates Regulation 14B. Also, we recommend relocating your bookshelf. Fit disrupts visual harmony from the exterior window line. Mara blinked. Ow! You can't see that bookshelf from outside? Dean turned. His smile thinned. We have ways of observing the property lines. She didn't respond. Just stood there, suddenly aware of how alone she was. After he left, she walked the perimeter of the cabin. It took her nearly an hour to spot them teeny black objects nailed high on trees around her property. At first she thought they were birdhouses, but they had lenses. They were cameras. Hidden, watching. The unease returned, stronger this time, not like stress, not like burnout. Something different, something primal. Mara was no longer sure if this was a retreat or a trap. The first notice arrived the next morning, slipped under her door without a knock. A plain envelope, no stamp. No return address, just a bold red stamp across the top. Non-compliance warning, level 1, inside. The note was typed in blocky font. You are in violation of Regulation 14B. All curtain colors must match the HOA-approved palette stone gray, birch white, or meadow taupe. Correction required within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in escalation to level 2 penalties. Silver Pines Compliance Board. Mara stared at it in disbelief. The curtains in question were beige. Beige, not neon, not patterned, not garish, just ordinary cotton beige. She tossed the letter aside, irritated. She wasn't here to play house with some hyper-controlling neighborhood watch. Still, she had a nagging feeling that ignoring the letter might not be as harmless as it seemed. That evening, she drove into the nearby town to grab groceries and a few essentials. When she returned, a second envelope was taped to her front door. It wasn't about the curtains this time. This one cited a visual disturbance caused by her firewood pile. Apparently, it exceeded the natural stacking aesthetic outlined in Article 9F of the HOA guidelines. She laughed out loud. Natural stacking aesthetic? Was that even a thing? Then she saw the fresh footprints leading away from her porch, disappearing into the trees. Too large to be her own. Too recent to be old. She didn't sleep well that night. The next few days became a steady stream of absurdity. A notice for failing to retrieve a welcome basket from the HOA headquarters by a non-existent deadline. Complaint about the smell of her cooking, unpleasant garlic notes supposedly drifting into the communal airspace. And then there were the sightings. At first, she thought it was just nerves. Maybe the stress of the job she'd left behind was finally catching up, but something didn't feel right. Every time she stepped onto the porch, she got the creeping, a sense of being observed, not just studied. One morning, while sipping coffee on the back deck, she spotted a figure deep in the woods. They were standing unnaturally still between the trees, wearing what looked like a maintenance uniform. When she blinked, they were gone. Mara bought trail cameras the next day and mounted them in 4 locations, one behind the cabin, one at the tree line, one aimed at her driveway, and one facing the narrow footpath that led toward the HOA's central office. She checked the SD cards obsessively. The first night, nothing. The second, just animals, raccoons, a deer, a bobcat near the back porch. But on the third night, past 2:17 a.m., she saw something different. A man, possibly Dean, walked slowly along the edge of her porch. He didn't knock. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the front window for nearly 3 full minutes, hands behind his back, body motionless. Then he turned and walked away. No flashlight, no vehicle sounds. Just silent, eerie calm. The footage made her stomach turn. She printed out a still frame and pinned it to her fridge as a warning to herself. She needed to be careful. The final straw came when she returned from a hike and found the front door of the cabin slightly ajar. Nothing had been taken. Nothing moved. And yet she could feel that something had been inside. The sense was impossible to explain, like walking into a room and knowing someone else's energy still lingered. She called the rental agent. No answer. She called the HOA office. Straight to voicemail. Then she called the sheriff's department in the nearest town. A tired-sounding dispatcher listened to her story, then paused. "You said you're in Silver Pines?" The voice said quietly. "Ma'am, I'm gonna give you a piece of advice if you're not a property owner there. Best you leave before they decide you're a problem." And with that, the line went dead. The attic was barely more than a crawl space, hot, dusty, filled with a kind of silence that swallowed even the sound of breath. Mara hadn't planned to go up there. She'd only opened the ceiling hatch to check for a leaking pipe when she noticed something strange, a draft, despite there being no windows or vents, and a slight echo where there shouldn't be one. Curious and uneasy, she climbed up with a flashlight clenched between her teeth, her fingers brushing against old insulation and cobwebs. The space smelled of mildew and something older, less recognizable. She scanned the beam with her light until it caught on something oddly geometric, a square seam in the far wall. It looked out of place, too clean and precise to be accidental. She crawled over to it and tapped. Hollow. The wood panel was loose. With a bit of prying, it popped free, revealing a narrow cavity between the wall studs. Inside was a locked metal box, tarnished and heavy. There was no key. She took it downstairs and spent an hour with a flathead screwdriver in pure frustration until the latch finally gave way. The lid creaked open like a coffin. Inside were files, yellowed manila folders, photographs, audio cassettes, and a thin leather-bound journal. The top folder had a label in faded Sharpie, Tenant File 3A, William Dunn. Mara's breath caught. The name wasn't familiar, but the address listed on the form was unmistakable. It was her cabin. The file included letters from the HOA, eerily similar to the ones she'd received. Curtain violations, lawn maintenance warnings, noise complaints. But Williams had progressed much further. Final warnings. Probationary status, even a demand for psychiatric evaluation per regulation to 2E. One letter stood out from the rest. It had no official seal, no formatting, just a single sentence in block letters. We know you found the wires. Compliance is no longer optional. Underneath the letters were photographs. Grainy black and white shots of William pacing inside the cabin, taken from odd angles as if through the walls. Another showed him standing in the backyard, looking directly at the camera, eyes wide, mouth open, fear, rage. Maybe both. The timestamps showed the pictures were taken just weeks before his sudden removal. According to a note scribbled in red pen, the journal was what chilled her most. It was full of erratic handwriting, increasingly frantic. The first few entries were measured. The violations are absurd, but I think I can ride it out. I just need the peace and quiet. Then, I keep hearing tapping in the walls at night. Like someone's inside, watching. Later still, they say I violated privacy regulations by covering my windows. Who the hell are they protecting? And finally, they're going to come for me soon. I found the listening devices. I found the cameras. I tried to report it, but the sheriff won't return my calls. The others are in on it. All of them. Sat on the floor for hours, surrounded by evidence of something deeply wrong. Something orchestrated and hidden. She played one of the cassette tapes using a portable recorder she dug out of an old drawer. William's voice crackled through. The speaker, frantic and whispering, "They don't want to manage a neighborhood. That's not what this is. It's a lab. A test. They're studying how much control they can exert without resistance. I try to leave. They cut my brakes. Click silence." The rest of the tape was blank. Mara looked around her cabin with new eyes. Every corner, every creak, every flickering light bulb now felt purposeful engineered. She checked behind her bookshelves, under the sink, inside the vents. She found 3 small black devices, all humming faintly. They looked like sensors or microphones, or both. By the time the sun came up, she hadn't slept. Her trust in reality had fractured. Someone had been here before her. Someone who didn't make it out. And now she was standing exactly where he had stood, holding the same warnings under the same roof, only now. She knew what was coming. The snow began falling just after midnight, fine and dry like powdered sugar shaken from the sky. By morning, the trees surrounding the cabin were buried halfway to their trunks, and the only road in or out had vanished beneath a thick white blanket. Mara stood at the window, watching the storm build in silence. Her phone had been dead for 2 days. The internet had dropped out without warning. Even the electricity flickered now, uncertain. She'd prepared for solitude, but this isolation felt engineered, deliberate. The heater buzzed faintly as she added another log to the fire. She hadn't slept much since finding the journal. William's words haunted her, especially the final entries. The paranoia, the surveillance, the warnings. She'd found the devices, just as he had. And like him, she'd tried to report it. But the local sheriff's department refused to take her calls. When she emailed the county housing board, the message bounced back. Twice that morning, she'd found a new envelope on the porch, despite the snow being untouched otherwise. No footprints, no tire tracks. Just the envelope read again, this time stamped "Final Notice." Level 3, in oversized font. Your continued disregard for community compliance procedures has resulted in mandatory intervention. Your safety and the cohesion of Silver Pines Preserve, removal is scheduled. You are instructed to remain calm and cooperative. Enforcement will arrive shortly. She read the letter again and again, her fingers trembling slightly. Removal. It was the same word used in William's file. She started fortifying the cabin. She dragged the dresser. In front of the back door, nailed boards across the windows, wedged a dining chair under the front doorknob. The fire crackled behind her like a living thing, casting warped shadows across the floor. She checked the generator twice, making sure it would kick on if the power went out for good. Her trail cameras had stopped transmitting, but she left them running anyway, if only for proof. The sun never truly rose that day. The sky stayed a dull, heavy gray, and the snowfall never let up. Around 7 p.m., she heard it the first sound in hours. The hum of engines. She killed the lights and crouched by the front window, just enough to peek past the boards. 3 black SUVs idled at the edge of her property, headlights cutting through the snow like search beams. Figures stepped out, 6 of them, maybe 7 all, in dark uniforms, faces obscured by hoods and goggles. They moved in formation, slow and deliberate, like they'd rehearsed this a dozen times. Mara backed away from the window, heart pounding. So hard she felt it in her throat. There was no siren, no demand for entry, just a soft, synchronized knock. She didn't answer. The knocking stopped. A voice, muffled and robotic, came through a bullhorn. "Miss Ellison, you are in violation of Community Integration Protocol. Open the door. This is your final opportunity." Mara didn't move. A second later, the power cut out completely. She activated the generator manually, heart hammering as the basement roared to life. Light returned dim and flickering, just as the front door shuddered. Once, then again. Heavy blows, calculated and patient. They were using a battering ram. She grabbed the flash drive containing copies of Williams' files and slipped it into her coat pocket. Another blow slammed against the door. The chair wedged beneath the handle buckled, but held for now. She looked around at the cabin, transformed into a fortress. She wasn't ready to die here. She wasn't going without exposing them either. Her backup connection was rigged to the generator. One click, and the cabin's interior would stream live to a hidden YouTube channel she'd set up earlier that week. They weren't just going to take her. This time the world would see them. Do it. The door broke on the 4th strike. The battering ram hit with such force that the hinges snapped clean off, sending wood splinters flying into the living room like shrapnel. The barricade, a heavy oak dresser, and 2 kitchen chairs toppled. Inward, Mara backed away, flashlight in one hand, the other clenched tight around her phone. She'd already hit the button. The live feed was running, streaming to the channel she'd created, broadcasting every second to anyone who might be watching. Figures flooded the cabin like a dark tide, 6 of them in total, dressed in black. Tactical gear, faces hidden behind matte helmets and reflective visors. No insignias, no names, just blank official silence. One of them raised a small device, scanning the room with a high-pitched hum. Another barked out, "Subject located. Proceed to secure." Mara raised her hands. "This is being recorded," she said, her voice shaking despite every ounce of resolve she'd built over the past few days. "You're on a live feed? People are watching? If you touch me," the leader stepped forward and grabbed her wrist in a practiced move, twisting just enough to force her to drop the phone. It clattered across the floor, but kept recording from beneath the kitchen table. The red streaming light still blinking. "No one's watching," the figure said. The voice was electronically filtered, mechanical and flat. "You've been offline for over 24 hours. "No," she breathed. "That's not no. I tested it. I checked it twice." They ignored her. 2 enforcers moved deeper into the cabin, tearing down the boards she'd nailed across the windows, scanning behind furniture, checking beneath the rugs. One held what looked like a Geiger counter, sweeping it toward the walls with sharp, calculated motions. Mara realized they weren't looking for weapons. They were looking for evidence. "Back corner clear," one of them called. "Files not found." The leader turned toward her again. "Where are the materials you accessed?" She didn't answer. When they didn't need to know, she'd already duplicated everything and sent it to 4 separate emails, if they were watching. Her feed, they'd see the live comments pouring in, now viewers confused, shocked, horrified. Some thought it was a horror arg. Others were already digging for clues. "You people don't get to erase this," Mara said, trying to steady her voice. Whatever the hell this HOA really is, you're done. Someone will come looking.
Someone?
Did come? The figure replied, tilting their head slightly. Done. We recovered him from this location 2 years ago. Non-compliant. Delusional. Thought he was a journalist. Mara's heart pounded. What did you do to him? Stabilized. Processed. His resistance was unsuccessful. The cold, clinical tone made her stomach twist. But before she could reply, a crackling voice burst through the radio attached to one of the enforcers. Command. This is Recon 4. We have breach outside systems are detecting a mirror signal. Live feed is spreading. Reddit and Discord channels lighting up. A pause. Orders. The lead figure froze, then slowly turned back to Mara. Containment no longer viable. Exfil now. The team moved like clockwork. They didn't restrain. Her didn't knock her out. They just turned and vanished through the door they'd broken down, melting back into the snowstorm without a word. One of them paused long enough to smash her trail cam with the butt of a weapon before disappearing into the trees. Silence returned. Only the flickering fire remained. The cabin door wide open to the night. Mara stumbled forward, grabbed her phone. Still recording? Over 8,000 live viewers. Comments flying in? Is this real? Call the cops. What the hell is Silver Pines? She needs help? They're coming back. You see you, Mara? She dropped to her knees, heart racing, tears mixing with snow that blew in from the open door. This wasn't over now. The world knew.